of course I was meant for this because God has given me this child. And so it's just that I needed to understand that I was picking up my cross every day and following God with being a mother. When we wake up in the middle of the night and, our baby needs a nurse again for the 5th or 6th time, we can just say, glory to God. I have so many grand ideas and hopes and dreams and things in the future that I would love to do right now. And I have to always remind myself, it is not my season for that. I thought I relied on God until I had kids. And then I realized I got some work to do. The mother and the wife is the heart of the home. And I just love that. It really just felt true in my own experience. We're the heart and the warmth and the thing that keeps everything going and moving, and just simplicity, is what's most useful. It's not having all the things, having a few good things and using those things well for the glory of God.
Friends, welcome back to Dust and Glory. If you're new here, my name is Sona. I'm a content creator, a mom of 3, and an Armenian Orthodox Christian. Today we speak about motherhood, not as an aesthetic or trend or performance for social media, but as a hidden sacrifice, a territory of absolute love. In the modern world, motherhood is often spoken about either as a burden to escape or an image to curate. Women are told to constantly do more, achieve more, consume more, and somehow remain endlessly available, productive, and fulfilled. And yet many mothers today feel deeply exhausted, isolated, anxious, and spiritually overwhelmed. Orthodox Christianity offers a radically different vision, a vision where true holiness is found in kitchens and nurseries and prayer corners, sleepless nights, and ordinary acts of self-sacrificial love. To help us to explore this mystery more deeply, I'm honored to be joined by Khouria Destinie from Ascetic Life of Motherhood, an Eastern Orthodox Christian mother, homeschooler, priest's wife with large social media platform whose work has inspired many women to rediscover simplicity, intentional living, and the spiritual beauty of Orthodox motherhood. Together, we will speak about raising children in the modern world, social media, asceticism in family life, the hidden sacrifices of motherhood, and the struggle to create peace, beauty, and spiritual stability inside our homes. Before we start, friends, I'd like to remind you, as always, that this video is a collaboration between the Western Diocese of the Armenian Apostolic Church and myself. We would truly appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel, Ola Sona, as well as the channel of the Western Diocese. You'll find all the links in the description down below. And now let's welcome our wonderful guest, Khouria Destinie. Welcome to Dust and Glory. It's a blessing to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Before we talk about motherhood and asceticism, I would like to hear your story. What kind of woman you were before Orthodoxy started to reshape your life?
Oh, that's a good question. Previous to finding Orthodoxy, I was Protestant, raised in the Protestant church, and my husband and I were interested in ministry and doing something that pertained to the church. And so I've always had, my faith was always the most important part of my life, I should say. I was always devoted to Christ. And when we were in college, we were mostly interested at that time on doing missions work. So that would be like going to a foreign country and spreading Christianity there. And it was through our time there that we discovered Orthodoxy in college, I should say. And that kind of threw a little bit of a wrench into the plan because my husband was preparing for becoming a pastor. That's what he was interested in doing and maybe going to get ordained. And so we had a lot of questions once we discovered Orthodox Christianity, mostly about just church history and how did we get here and how do we know that the church we go to right now is the right one. And so anyway, that was kind of where we were before. But we were married young. We got married at 18 and 19. And so we were married all through college. And interestingly enough, coming into Orthodoxy, we came into it together. It was very much a combined effort and a journey together. But we were always family-minded and interested in, raising a Christian family. So there were so many parts of my life that were similar to the life I'm living now, just in a completely different context. I never imagined that we would be in the Orthodox Church and that my husband would be an Orthodox priest. But so much of the basics of where we are, I feel like the Lord was preparing us for the life that we had now. So we just kind of took a little detour in there. But glory to God, it was, we feel so thankful that we found the Orthodox Church. And rather that the Lord led us to the Orthodox Church. I don't think that I myself would have found it. But I feel like he led us here and brought us to this beautiful life that we have now.
It's beautiful. So seems like both of you are converts from Presbyterianism, right?
Not Presbyterian, Protestant, but we were non-denominational.
Non-denominational. So both you and your husband are converts from non-denominational church to Eastern Orthodoxy. Conversion comes with beauty, but also loss.
Yeah.
You have new spiritual discoveries, but also experience misunderstanding and sacrifices. And I was wondering, what was the hardest part of your conversion story?
That's a great question. There were a lot of hard parts throughout the process. It was about a 5-year conversion, I would say, from the first time I encountered an Orthodox church until we actually were received. So there's a lot of hard conversations in that time. I think in some ways we were sort of working things out in our marriage as well. That was, part of the challenge was, my husband was reading the early church fathers and learning all this information. And I personally felt very content. I didn't feel like my worldview was being shattered or anything like that. I thought, no, we love God. Like, we read the Bible. All of these things seem to be good. And so there was kind of an internal push and pull between us that at times was very scary and difficult because it was unimaginable to me that our faith would be different, that we would have different practice, that we would have different beliefs. And so that was part of it that felt very scary for me. And I'm not sure what my husband would feel about that, but he might have a different perspective in his version. But for me, it felt like it was very much I don't feel like he was taking us to Orthodoxy, but it was definitely something that like he would be bringing it up. And I was like, oh, I don't want to have this conversation again. But we did. We had a lot of really hard conversations. And again, for me, I imagined my life was, he was going to be a pastor. We were maybe going to do some missionary work. And it felt like a lot of that was being threatened. And so that was really hard and really scary. When we did make the decision for him to step down from ministry, he was a youth pastor for 2 years. I felt very much of the same mind of like, yeah, I think he probably should step down because his beliefs and thoughts on the church had sort of shifted enough that it didn't feel right to continue teaching something that was either contrary to his own beliefs or contrary to the church's beliefs. And so that felt right. But we didn't know where we were going. And I think in my mind at that point, this would have been in probably 2011 or so. I was just like, let's take us to the Orthodox Church. Like, I just kind of had this feeling of like, not there. Because I had been there years prior and just felt like totally freaked out by it. I was like, that was here. And we hadn't gone back at that time. And so, there felt like there was a sacrifice there when he stepped down. We took a little windy path. We visited for about a year's time. We went to just every church in the area and visited all these different churches. And that felt terrible too. But I knew that we were looking for something. I just didn't know what it was. But I felt like for somehow when we found it, we would know that was it. And so when we finally did go to the Orthodox Church. To me, it was the liturgy itself that just spoke to me, and that was it for me. When I went to the liturgy, again, this had been about 4 years between the two experiences. My heart had just completely shifted and changed and softened. And I attribute that to the Lord, and my husband. Patience and his just gentle leading was what I needed. And so when we went, I knew that's where we should be, but that came with other sacrifices. How do we explain this to our family? And what is our future? My husband was looking into other jobs. He started working as a deputy sheriff. And so that was a little bit of a small death of that dream of like, well, we're not here for ministry, but we're here for Christ. It wasn't an obvious hop, skip, and a jump to, of course, we'll just go to the priesthood. That's not how this works. In the back of my mind, I had always hoped that maybe that was something that we would do, but I had no idea even what that would entail. And so I remember very vividly on our reception to the church, we were both received and baptized together in the church. And it felt so joyful, but also kind of sorrowful in a way, because it was a death to the life that I thought we were going to have. But it was just so bright with our future of like, wow, what is this new future? What does God have in store for us? It was just completely unexpected. But I felt so sure when we were received, this is it. This is right. And I don't want to be anywhere else. I can't imagine being anywhere else. And the joy of experiencing that together as a couple is indescribable. I'm so thankful that we were received together and that we did it together. In fact, in a recent conversation we had talking about it, my husband leads a lot of catechumens into the faith. And so he was telling me from his perspective that he didn't feel like it was like him leading me or him, having a different feeling. He felt like we really were doing it together. And I think that is right. I think that some of those internal feelings of like, oh, not this, was really just, I didn't want to be wrong. I didn't want to acknowledge that maybe we weren't in the right place. There was so much fear in that, maybe this isn't where we were supposed to be. There's just a lot of fear. And I think he was experiencing those exact same things. And so we did it so gently. And so it took us a long time, but when we were received, there was no doubt. I felt so positive and sure. And we gave up those things, those dreams willingly to God as a sacrifice. And I remember my husband explaining to his parents, who were, they were supportive, although I could only imagine it was difficult for them as well. My husband's father is a pastor, but he told his dad, he said, your mom and you have both raised me to love God and follow him wherever he leads. And that's what we're doing. And I think that was something that they appreciated. And it's true. They taught him to love God and follow him. And here we were. It's just not at all what we.
Wow. It's beautiful, beautiful. And I remember in one of the interviews you were describing this reverence that you found in Orthodox churches that you haven't found anywhere else, that people feel, it feels like people know that they are in the real presence of the King of Kings.
Yeah.
And that is so very unique about, both Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox, is that reverence that people experience during the Divine Liturgy. And could you please take us back to the moment when your husband came and said that he wants to be an Orthodox priest? What was it like? Sure. Could you take us to that emotional journey and personal journey? And what was your biggest sacrifice that you had to make?
So that was also not a moment. That was a few years. Lots of conversations and lots of prayers. I would say so we were Orthodox in 2012. And I think maybe in, probably 2013. So 3 years later, my husband started to feel like, well, if that was something needed, if there was, like any kind of service to the church, if that was needed, like he would be willing. He wasn't entirely sure about a calling to the priesthood, but he was willing. And so he scheduled a meeting with our priest and talked to him about it, and really walked away a little discouraged. The priest is our priest back home, is very wise. And I'm guessing he had this conversation many times with young men. And so he basically just said, maybe not, maybe like in the future, like after you retire, you could do something like some, ministry, but, just kind of just keep doing what you're doing, like serve behind the altar. He was an altar server. But why don't you do the St. Stephen's course? Like just so that you can, get some studying in and stuff. So he was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So he started doing the St. Stephen's course, which is something that our Antiochian Archdiocese requires for people to become a deacon. It's not necessarily like, it's not a guaranteed spot, of course, but it's like the prerequisite to that. And it takes 2 years. So he did that for a year. And it was about a year later in that time, many different circumstances happened. So in that year, it was pretty significant for us because we had paid off all of our student loan debt from college. And that was really significant to free us up from that, which was a huge undertaking. And so we had a debt-free party. We celebrated with all of our friends and families and did like bring your own beer, kind of cheap version. And there's a couple there who's actually the priest's son and daughter-in-law, and they're both priest kids, by the way. And so she tells us, okay, like, so you paid off your debt, like, what's next? And we're like, well, what do you mean? Like, and she's like, the priesthood. And we were really caught off guard. Like, oh, like we'd never spoken about that before with anybody. And so she was like, I mean, it's pretty obvious that's what you should be doing. And so we were really taken back by that. And within a very short period of time, I want to say a couple months, maybe at the most, we had that happen several times. Some of your friends were like, so seminary, priesthood. And we were like, where is this coming from? And then our godparents think so. They were like, this is something we should consider. And so I think that was the Lord's way of sort of like re-enlivening that conversation. Because at this point, my husband was a bit discouraged from his conversation with the priest and thought, yeah, maybe he doesn't think that's for me, And so that woke us up to, well, we need to pray about this. We need some wisdom. We need to discern. And my husband reminds me of this often. He says in the scripture, we don't, I think it's Jesus, but he says you don't receive wisdom because you don't ask for it. So you should ask for it. And so we were asking the Lord for wisdom. What do we do in this situation? And he started, and both him and I both started to feel this strong conviction of, if he was needed, we kind of had this perspective, if he was needed, we would be willing. We would do that. And then it turned to, like, I think that this is what I should be doing. And so he had scheduled an appointment with our priest to speak to him again, and just said, I think I just want to let him get to know me a little bit more, hear my background, and talk more about this. And after that conversation, he was very candid. He said, yeah, I think you should apply to seminary. What we didn't know at that time, though, was that was sort of a testing period. His discouragement was purposeful in the sense that, it's only the people that really have a calling that are going to be like, I really do have this call, and I think this is what I should be doing. But the nice thing about the priesthood is none of us are worthy, and none of us get to ordain ourselves. The bishops and the priests and all of the wise counsel around us are the ones that deem if we are, fit for that role. And I say we because it is very much an us thing together. Obviously, he's ordained, but little known fact, they will not ordain a priest if his wife is not supportive. So it has to be both of us. And so that's part of the process when you are applying to seminary, you're interviewed by your bishop and your priest has to give an approval. There's all of these, steps, and then they decide, yes, you are worthy. So it's not on us. We just get to say, I'm here, Lord, send me, or I'm willing. But it has to be done in the proper way. So to me, when we were discerning the priesthood, I knew in my heart it was right. I mean, I never had a doubt that this is what he has been called to. It's just, looked different than I expected in my youth. And it was very humbling. It was a very humbling part of the process. But our parents, that was a really cool moment. I guess my father-in-law, again, I mentioned he's a pastor. We sat down with them and told them that we would be going to seminary, which meant we were going to be moving, 3,000 miles away to New York. And they started crying. They were in tears. And they said, this is what you should be doing. This is right. We know that this is your call. And they're so happy. So they are not Orthodox themselves, but again, they have been just such a supportive parent for us to every step of the way. And they knew even when he was little, that's what he should be doing. But again, just look different. So those are kind of like those milestones and things that led us. It was not an individual effort. It was certainly a communal and familial and like pastoral decision altogether.
Yeah, feels like a full circle moment. Beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Many women today are pulled into thousands of directions. Their self-expression, career, social media, beauty standards, hobbies, and also, of course, they have to be perfect mothers, perfect wives. How do you protect that peace?
Well, that's interesting because, I do feel like there is some societal expectation on women and mothers and stuff, even being a priest wife. But I have found that we just we are accountable to God. And so all of our actions and everything that we do, what really matters is how God views that, and how, I guess, having a heavenly minded attitude about all things, to just give glory to God or just to glorify myself. I think we have to always question those things. So as far as the parish is concerned, I think you had mentioned that part of your question. I don't feel as if I need to portray myself as like a perfect family or that we don't have struggles or that we don't have problems. In fact, I think, being Orthodox is being a real person, being somebody who faces struggles and overcomes them with God's strength. And, when we fall, we get back up quickly. And so I have always attempted to be that way. Like my parishioners will see my kids have meltdowns, and I don't want my kids to also have that same expectation of like, oh, just because they're the priest kids, they're perfect. No, of course not. They're children, And so we, as clergy families, I think that the goal is that we, the prayer that I say is that we can stand before thee and before our fellows in thy sight as an ideal family. That is the prayer that I pray. And I think about that, and what is an ideal family? I think an ideal family is one that, is devoted to God. And that does not have anything to do with perfection of any kind. That we are attempting to follow God, strive to follow his commandments and to do his will and to repent along the way when we mess up, which of course we will, the mistakes we made, which of course we will, we get back up and we continue following him. And And so part of that is, that's not to say that there isn't important work to do. There's still important work to do. I think that, having order and peace and harmony in our homes, especially as mothers, I think is perhaps like a more greater burden on us for our children and things like that to establish that in our homes. And so that's something that I'm always working on. And do I do it perfectly? Absolutely not. The other night my husband was gone and we were doing bedtime and the baby was crying and the toddler was crying and there was music playing and we're trying to clean up dinner. And I just totally got overwhelmed and was like, this is too much, and I'm barking orders and it took me okay, I need to go lay down and nurse the baby so that she stops crying, and then help the toddler who's crying, and then worry about the dishes later. And because it was a moment of absolute chaos, which happens every day of my life. So I laid down and rested and came back and I told my daughters, I said, so I'm supposed to teach you how to handle yourself when you get overwhelmed. So let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's just throw that out of your mind. Don't do what I did. Don't do that. Let's start over. And so I did. I apologized to them. And I never tried to excuse my own behavior because of, I'm the mom or something like that. We have to treat our children with kindness and respect in that way. And the way we speak to them. And I don't do that perfectly. In fact, it can often be a struggle for me to just treat them or speak to them kindly when I'm frustrated or when I'm in a moment of chaos or stress myself. And so I think just even these real moments happen to every household, every family, has to deal with these things. And so it's always something we strive for to bring peace. When there's chaos, let's bring the peace, let's bring the order. And I have found that it tends to be me. It tends to be me is the one who needs to, bring us back into that order and that peace and that harmony, between me and everyone in the household. I was listening to a talk this week on marriage from Patricia Netzer family, and that's what he talked about is the mother and the wife is the heart of the home. And I just love that. It really just felt true in my own experience. We're the heart and the warmth and the thing that keeps everything going and moving. And so to do that joyfully and to do that, however we serve, whether that's our homes, our families, our parish, our community, that we do it because we love God and we love the people in front of us and we're thankful for everything we have and we want to offer that back to the Lord. So if we have that perspective, then, wiping your baby's bottom is thank you, Lord, for this job because it has to be done. And what a tender thing to do and so intimate and private, yet, and maybe gross, but we do it because we love our children. And, the same can be true for parishioners that are going through difficult times or, a mom that's really overwhelmed and, can I help hold your baby? I'm over here in chaos too, but we can do it together. There's so many ways that we can lift each other up and carry each other's burdens. That it all is a joy. I don't find that to me, I think that serving is the way that we love God, we serve our families. And serve the parish is how we love God. So if we think about it in that way, it's a little bit easier perspective. But your question about inner peace, I find that inner peace. I think for me, it starts with myself and my prayers. If I am not attending to my prayers, if I am not finding those pockets of rest throughout the day, I am no good to myself or anybody else in my path. And so I usually have to find about, like 10 minutes of a reset will change the whole course of my day. So, for me personally, there's a lot of working with a noise, one chaos, being at home with children all day. And so we have to intentionally sprinkle rest in there for ourselves in like a little bit of a retreat. So what I have done when there's times where I'm just not handling myself or it just feels like I'm overwhelmed and too much, I will send my children outside, all of them if I can, and just pour myself some tea and sit in silence. Or I will go upstairs, dismiss myself, go upstairs, lay down the baby, nurse, have that moment of peace and quiet. Like just something about my ears, just having no noise will reset and regulate me a bit. And then, of course, saying my prayers in the morning and the evening and throughout the day. You know, when there's a really hard moment, I've yelled, "Lord have mercy!" Like, yelled at it, like "Lord have mercy." And I'd rather say that than any other thing that I couldn't be thinking at that moment. You know, just so crying out to God, God help me, please give me strength. Lord help me. You know, these little, I call them like arrow prayers. That will help. But usually when I find that there's chaos, I just have to tell myself it will be over within 15 minutes because typically that chaos doesn't last more than 15 minutes. So I could do this. I'm going to get through it, just do the next thing. And then if I can find some quiet in there, that helps. Also, I've been walking for the past week, and I found that just getting outside, just walking myself, you know, for 30 minutes, whew, that changes the course of my day too. So these are like little practical things that I do that really do help regulate that and bring peace in the moment when there's a chaotic moment. That isn't, you know, but I think again, if you're working, everything that we have that we give to others, we have to have ourselves in order to give. So you need to sort of have that, you know, your soul needs to be refreshed or restored by God in order to do a lot of these things. And so we just have to be intentional with our time and our day and our schedules and have really realistic expectations for ourselves. It's more often than not that when I get these overwhelmed feelings that I'm trying to do too much. So having a realistic expectation on what I should or shouldn't be doing is probably the best way to do it. And that usually comes with having a check-in with my husband. He's like, "No, that's too much. I don't know why you thought that was reasonable." I'm like, "What's too much? I don't know what." That's what makes this different, is having older kids that are capable of helping.
Of course.
I wouldn't be able to do things like this without help, obviously. So.
Of course. And, you know, I have 15 years of the age gap between me and my sister. I basically was her second mom. Mm-hmm. And, you know, sometimes people would say, well, she's a teenager, to my mom, right? Like, why do you need her to help you? Like, she has her own life. But I'm so grateful for that experience that I had, because the motherhood experience didn't scare me at all. Like, going into motherhood, I was not scared. I knew I can handle it. Of course, it's radically different when you're a sister and you're a mom. But I was prepared in some ways, and I'm endlessly grateful for that experience. And also, it created a really nice bond between me and my sister. So that's also very important.
I have much younger siblings too. I'm one of 6, but my one sister is 10 years younger than me, so similar to my daughters. And then I have a sister that's 12 and 13 years younger. So I definitely relate to that. And I love taking care of my little sisters and feel so thankful that I had that experience too. And that's certainly a buzzword that you hear, like parentification, is that what they call it? Where like the young children are like little parents, but I don't see it as that way. I see it as, you know, we are a family and we all help each other out. And so I think it builds a really strong identity in the family when you have siblings and you help each other out, because you belong to each other and you belong together, and it instills hard work, and, you know, it roots out that selfishness that we have for children, that like the world serves you, you know, like, no, you serve and you help, and we do it joyfully, and sometimes we don't want to, but we do it sometimes. But that's not to say that they don't get to be children. Of course, they get to be children, and they don't carry their responsibility of caring for their children, their siblings, but they at least help and serve in that way. So that's kind of my perspective on that.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. Your channel is called Ascetic Life of Motherhood. Asceticism is, in the minds of the most people, connected to desert fathers, not home, kitchen, or domestic labor. What is your connection between that asceticism of the early church and ordinary motherhood?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I got the name Ascetic Life of Motherhood based off of a book that I was reading early in motherhood called Ascetic Life of Lives of Mothers. So it's very similar. I never predicted that I would make a website and a brand out of that. But at the time, I was reading this book, this prayer book, which you can find on Ancient Faith publications. It was completely mind-blowing to me that asceticism could be in motherhood. I thought, what? The exact thing. That's not something you would have imagined would be a part of, one second, let me get my little baby here, would be a part of motherhood. And so essentially, asceticism is an opportunity to deny ourselves and follow Christ. It's picking up our cross. So in this book, Ascetic Life of Mothers, she essentially makes that connection between the difficult task of motherhood, of denying ourselves, our sleep, our schedules, of freedom, whatever it is that we had previously. We lay that to rest. We lay that aside and we offer that to the Lord as asceticism to the Lord for the sake of our child. So it's, denying ourselves and living for somebody else. And when I was in the early days of motherhood, it was so shockingly hard that I sort of had these dark thoughts of like, maybe this was not what I was supposed to do. Maybe I'm not meant for motherhood, right? I had this fear that there was something wrong with me. And this book had such a profound impact on me in those early days of like, oh, no, not at all. Of course I was meant for this because God has given me this child. And so it's just that I needed to understand that I was picking up my cross every day and following God with being a mother. And it's not that motherhood is just hard and difficult. There's so much joy and love and like indescribable purpose, now once your child's born. But it is difficult. It is a different lifestyle than we lead before. We really are, just as like we get married and, we no longer live for ourselves. We now have to think about another person every single day of our life. Even if they were on vacation or they were traveling for work, we're still thinking of them and how are they doing and what do they need? There's this interconnectedness. And even more so with a child who is completely dependent on you. Especially, I would say mothers take on that heavier load. And so it's just it's a complete worldview shift to think that asceticism has any place in motherhood, but it really does. When we wake up in the middle of the night and, our baby needs a nurse again for the 5th or 6th time, we can just say, glory to God. Thank you, Lord, for my child. Thank you for my husband. Thank you for my family. We can offer prayers in the middle of the night, just like the greatest monks do. Not after you're waking up at night.
Motherhood is going to bleed. I'm sorry to say that, but it's going to bleed into every single other thing you're doing. Yeah. Every single aspect of who you are is going to be shaped by motherhood, by your child, and the new person that you become. And it's beautiful. And yes, there is a big sacrifice in it, but there's so much joy in it too. The joy part is not spoken that much, but there is joy in that. A little bit of inconvenience, but ultimately joy, yes.
I think what's inconvenient at times is we often think that we have some other thing to do that may be more important or something in that regard. And children have a way of pulling us back and saying, no, my needs are more important, at this moment. And so I think it's just a recentering of, I think we're so distracted in our world and our priorities that we forget that it's the people right in front of us that God has given us that are our responsibility and our priority. And so for mothers, of course, it's our children should come first before anybody in the world, besides our husbands, So our husband and our children should be our primary responsibility. And when they're, taken care of and they're good, then whatever we have, capacity for, or God has allowed us, that works, then thank God, we can do those things. But it has to be all in the proper order, And so in the times when I've tried to do things out of order, I usually run into problems. When I'm trying to, accomplish something that's unreasonable, then I'll usually hit the wall and realize, okay, maybe I needed to just stay where I am and where what God has given me. I have so many grand ideas and hopes and dreams and things in the future that I would love to do right now. And I have to always remind myself it is not my season for that. Right now, my children are small and they need me a lot. And that is okay. And that's not to say that you can't have help and that you can't have dreams or, accomplish some of those things. It's just, we just have to make sure that our children are our priority. And, thinking of the joys of motherhood, I think one of the things that's so special to me about kids is, first of all, they're so much better than me. I mean, just seeing the goodness in children it'll put me to shame at times, because they're just so good and innocent and pure and, deserving of love. And just as God created them to be, it's really beautiful. But as a mother, I love that so much of what I do influences them, like almost directly, the things, and I'm speaking of small children. As they get older, this will not necessarily be the case. But so, for example, I mentioned that I'm into walking this week. We've been walking every day. My kids are like so excited about walking. I was taking our walk, and I've got 5 kids. I've got a stroller. I've got a carrier sometimes, and we're just doing our walk. And we're doing it all together. And to them, it's like, this is the greatest thing we're doing today. And it's just so simple. We're just walking. But it's become their favorite part of the day. I got them all little watches that they can track their steps, And so they're like running around the backyard, me and their stuff. It's just so sweet. It's, that can now at times that can feel like a burden of like, oh, I just wish I could, Whenever we say that line, it's usually always, there's always pride in there. But I just wish I could do this by myself. And sometimes you want to do things by yourself. But, I look behind me and I've got a trail, these little ducks following me, walking. And I think, like, what else would I be doing right now? I guess I could just be grumpy by myself and, or like just be like, come on, guys, let's keep going. Like, I feel like it's such an image of motherhood of like, let's just keep trucking and keep trying and keep doing it. And, our goal as mothers is that our children will be with us for eternity. We want to be together. And I look at these children that God has given me, and they're so precious and so good. And they're such a gift and they're so valuable. And it's my job as a mother to shape them and make them, into the image of God that He has for them. And so that is a fearful thing to do. But certainly be emboldened that it's the most important work of shaping the souls of these precious babies. There's nothing I think that's more important in the world than helping the ones that God has given us right in front of us. So.
Absolutely agree with you. How do you reconcile these two things that modern women face? First, we are told to find ourselves, whatever that is. On the other hand, Orthodoxy offers this other path of self-denial and, sacrifice and bearing a cross every day. How do you reconcile this two in your life?
Sure. Well, I would say the world's dialectic about our identity, I disregard completely. I don't think that we have any identity apart from God, apart from, the image of God and what He's created us to be. And so any identity we have that's apart from that, then I kind of throw that out, I guess. To me, my most important identity is that I'm an Orthodox Christian, and that I am a wife, and that I am a mother, and those are the identities that God has given me. And so, first, I have Christ. He is the most important thing, and then second, I have my husband, and who are the most important person to me, and then I have my children, which God has given me. And so, outside of that identity, I think we have to try really hard to just stay focused on those things. She has 6, and she doesn't have less. Deal with
that. I agree, Mama.
Yes. I want you just not like it. It's a difficult, messaging that we have to always combat. And certainly those influences are there, but as much as you can, I think, surround yourself with people that have the same vision, share that same conviction. Women that love their husbands and respect their husbands and, want to have strong, good marriages and never speak ill of their spouses. And, families that are, well ordered and, children that are good, that your children can grow up with and have those that influences and God plans that, pour into you and pray for you and share share life with you. I think, in as much as you can make the church your community and your family, I think, that those are ways that I do my best to stay rooted into the church is through those relationships. Of course, like my circumstances is my husband is my priest, but, staying close near your priest and get to know him as much as you can. And just have these wise people in your life that can encourage you on that path of being a Christian, as a mother, as a wife, as a image of God. So those are some things that I try my best to do. And I don't identify, myself with my political stance or my orientation or any of those things. I think those are the world's dialectics. And I think there's so much more to a person than those things, that I feel like those become traps for us too. I guess, root ourselves in whatever that is more so than God and more so than the church and what He has for us. So I don't put too much weight into those things as much as, or even my struggles. I would say even my struggles. That's another thing that we like to glorify our struggles and identify ourselves with that, or, that's not the case. That's not who we are. We're not defined by those things. We're defined by God and who He created us to be. And so as much as we are striving to be the person that he has created us to be, then we're on the right track. But that to me has always meant staying close to Christ and following him. And that looks like to me being in the church, feeling deeply rooted into the life that God has for me, and fulfilling my purposes there. So hope that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. And I also, since you mentioned, going to church with kids, I noticed how welcoming Eastern Orthodox churches are. I'm of Armenian, but I grew up in Russia, and I would always see tons of kids at Eastern Orthodox churches, Russian churches, and I loved that. I loved that there was usually a separate room for them, but it was kind of joined with the church. So there were, if they needed to step out, they would, step out, but ultimately they were in the presence of the congregation and God and the church. And I just, do you feel overwhelmed going there with kids, or because it is a sacrifice? Let's be honest, it is a little bit of a sacrifice because you don't have the same time that you had before to pray and to stay in the presence of the Lord by yourself. It's a very different experience with kids, and there's definitely a big sacrifice there. Because I would choose, if I could, to be alone with God for as much as I can. But now I have to make sure that they're also in the presence of the Lord and they are getting the fullness of this experience. So that becomes also a very important thing. Do you sometimes feel overwhelmed about bringing all kids to church, or do you feel like it's okay for a time being not to be able to be fully present, but this is more important? What's your experience with that?
I mean, it really depends on your circumstances and probably the ages of your kids. But I have been in the thick of motherhood for 10 years. So majority of my time as an Orthodox Christian, I've been a mother. And so it's sort of, I guess my expectations are a bit more realistic now. So it can be overwhelming, yes. It can be difficult at times to manage children in church. But I also see it as my duty to them as well, to bring them to church. As Christ tells us, let the little children come to me and do not forbid them. I take that so seriously that it's my job to bring them to him, even if it feels like I didn't say a prayer, or I couldn't pay attention, or I just spent the whole time just disciplining or frustrated or whatever it is. I'm doing what the Lord has asked me to do. And so there are practical ways that can be easier or more realistic, I guess. I was just talking to a mom about this because she was able to attend church for the first time without her two small children. And she said it was incredible. She said it was like she wasn't distracted at all. And she felt even a little guilty for feeling like, wow, that was amazing. But it's a different experience when you have small children at church. It really is a different experience. But like I see my children now, it helps when you have older ones because you can start to see the fruit of your labor rather quickly. My 2-year-old, he's 2.5 years old now, but he's finally able to stay in church for the whole liturgy and sometimes even Orthros with very few breaks. And so I celebrate that. I remember when we were just in the back the whole time because he wasn't quiet and he was running. And, it's like, wow, look, he's able, we're pretty much staying in church the whole time now. And that only took a couple of years, and now with my newborn, it'll just be a matter of time when I'm back in the back again and just chasing around little toddlers. But I start to see, now my older ones are able to stay in there and read along with the service and yes, they still have little squabbles, and yes, I still have to redirect them and remind them to be quiet all the time. But I see the progress, and I see the holy work in front of me. And, there's moments where my children will be staring at the icon and they just ponder some deep mystery. And I'm just like, wow, how amazing that I'm having this conversation with my 4-year-old right now. Or, my daughter was reading one of the hymns and she asked me about the woman with the issue of blood. She underlined it in the pamphlet. She said, what is this? And so I got to talk to her about that story of the woman that's healed by God by touching the hem of his robe. And her eyes were just like really big and awake. And, there's just so many of these like holy moments that we have while we're at church with my children. My daughter will be, we have these little, like, I don't know what they're called, like LCD writing things. I forget what they're called, but they're like little writing tablets. And she'll just be standing there and she'll try to write, an icon, or she'll copy the words that she sees in front of her, or she's drawing the cross in front of her. And, they are immersed in the life of the church, and they go to church often enough that they notice these things, and they know when to stand and when to sit and when to go to the back. And, they participate in the services themselves. And so, although it's tiring and difficult at times, you just have to have this eternity mindset of like, they are so good and so pure, and this is forming them in their foundation as for the rest of their lives. These hymns that they're listening to are being planted in them so that they can recall the entire, 50 Psalm, or they can say like the creed and all these things that are just like, what do we believe? Well, I believe in one God, Father Almighty, and they'll just like say the whole thing, and these are why we bring our children to church as children. It's because it's forming them into the image of God and who they are at such a young age. And it's so crucial. I think if we give in to that temptation of like, oh, it'll be easier when they're older and they'll be, more able to participate. That's not what Christ asks us. He says, let the little children come, and I think that he says this purposefully because we know that it's difficult to have little children. They run and they play and they yell and they have tantrums and stuff. But I think if we give in to that temptation of not bringing them, then really missing out on something crucial that, they are, we baptize and chrismate and commune our babies, and it's because they're full members of the body of Christ. They're just as much a part of it as we are. Yeah. And I think that's reflected in the liturgy and the services. So although not every church culture is that way, as you pointed out, I would hope that this new generation of people coming to the church, that we can change that culture, that we can make it a community that's welcoming to families and children and elderly and young people and young adults, that all people are welcome. And we can kind of change that perspective, or even that, that's the word, the expectation that it's for adults. It's not. It's for everybody, So yes, it's difficult, but so worth it. And you're really doing the Lord's work by bringing your kids.
Absolutely. And I even see changes in Armenian churches as well. Back in the early 2000s, when I just started to go to church, I remember that there were not many kids. And now the churches are full of kids. And it's a little bit different here. Here, there are Sunday schools while the liturgy is going on in some of the churches. And I definitely prefer when it's after. But it is a choice of the church. I'm not here to, say that it's the wrong choice, but I definitely notice the difference as well. That there are more children in general and more tolerance towards children in churches. Yeah,
absolutely.
I wanted to speak about your beautiful, profound, calming presence online. Just every post is redirecting me personally back to the real essence of what it means to be a Christian, Orthodox Christian mom. And how do you guard your heart from curating an image and also believing in that curated image?
Sure. Interesting. Well, I always actually wonder how I'm perceived. It's not obvious to me. Because as a content creator, you are creating things, but of course, it's not portraying myself in a particular way. I am portraying myself in a particular way, but I'm not always aware of how that's perceived. And so I think one of the things I do when I create something online is I have the perspective of, not trying to glorify myself. I don't hope that people think, oh, she's such a great Christian, such a great mom. That is not my goal. I hope that it is obvious and known that I also struggle and that I feel as if I'm like everybody else. I have challenges that I have to overcome, that I have sin that I have to repent of. And I'm certainly a real person, but I also don't want to glorify those things. I take the St. Paisios, he has a beautiful example in, I think it's the book Spiritual Struggles. He talks about the two different types of people in church. There's the flies and the bees. And he describes how the fly, flies around and only notices the trash, or kind of just tries to notice the bad stuff going on, the scandal and things like that. And then you have the bee, who is in the same field, but only sees the flowers and the good things. And if you were to ask the bee, hey, where do you find the trash around here? They won't even know. They only can see, the good things. I love that perspective because we all know those people, right? It's like you're either the fly or the bee. You're either the one who's going to be focusing on the negative things, or you're going to be the one who's like, glory to God, thank God, this is good, trying to see the good. I feel as if I'm more of the positive, the glass half full sort of perspective. My husband always makes fun of me because I always assume the best of somebody when he is a bit more skeptical. And I'm like, oh, maybe I don't have a good reason to think that. I just kind of have always had that more positive mentality. So perhaps that is my disposition. But if I'm going to share something online, I feel responsible for it in that I'm saying it, I'm speaking it, I'm portraying it. So whatever I'm showing, I don't want it to be a stumbling block or a distraction or an opportunity to rile up someone's passions or cause them to sin in any way. So I do feel very careful about what I share and what I put out there, because I know that it actually affects people, and I know, all of our words that we speak affect people and affect the people around us. So we have to choose our words carefully. So I do that intentionally. And when I am sharing online, if I am, it's only coming up from a place of abundance, right? So like everything else in my household is in order and my children are cared for. And, then I can say, oh, great, I'm going to hop on and share something, or I'm going to record this. But for the most part, my life does not have a camera going on. No one sees the things that are happening in my house. My husband and my children know what our lives are like. But I also don't want it to be a misrepresentation either. So my children they know that I record videos and they know that I share things online, and I'll show them those things. I'm not embarrassed at all to show them, because I want them to watch them and know, like, yeah, that's our life. That's true. I never want to be a hypocrite or, my children to find this account when they're older and feel so like embarrassed that their mom was, a big phony, So I feel there's a fear of God and a fear of being a hypocrite. I never want to be those things. So I guess if you have those things in mind, it changes the kind of things that you are creating. The internet rewards you for controversy and rewards you for clickbait and things like this. And I just don't care for those things. I would rather less people see it and it be true than to make people fight in the comments or, cause any kind of, disagreement or like scandal, for example. It's another one too, like saying something shocking, even if it were true. Not all things need to be said. Not all things are profitable. And so even if it's true, right? So I think that's sort of how I approach content creation and sharing parts of my life. I hope that it's an encouragement to people. I love sharing. I do feel like it's something natural. It makes me feel even more grateful at times when I share things, because I was like, wow, look at my beautiful life that God has given me. I'm so thankful for that. But that comes from, so many blessings of the path that led us here and the people that help us and, the ways that we're well supported. And, there's so many factors that are involved there. But I love to give back in the many ways that we have been helped. For the most part, everything that I share is not like my original idea. I've gotten it from a conversation in real life or a mentor or an older woman who shared with me her idea, and I take that to heart and I share it in hopes that it helps somebody else who's also like me, who's like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing, but let's figure it out together. Here's what I'm trying. Here's what I'm doing. This is what I've noticed. And sharing it from a place of humility and also a desire to encourage other people that are just like me, who are trying to figure it out.
You said something so beautiful and profound, that you're pouring to social media. You're pouring from abundance. And that I think is so important, because you can tell that even though I think you have beautiful page and on Instagram and YouTube, and you put a lot of effort into it, you can still tell that it's not your mission, your goal and mission in life. You can still tell that what's happening behind the camera, that's your goal and mission. That's your life, real life, and important and priority. Every time the camera turns on, you have to perform a little bit, right? Doesn't mean you're not authentic, but there's a little presence of performance there. But it's so important not to mistake that performance for the real priorities in life.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. I agree.
So I wanted to also speak a little bit about raising 5 kids. And since you just recently became a mom of 5, first of all, did you learn something from your children in those 10 years of motherhood about God that you have never learned otherwise? Would never learn otherwise?
I did learn that I thought I relied on God until I had kids. And then I realized I got some work to do. So yes, in that way, I think that my prayers were easier to come by, much easier to pray before I had kids. And when I had kids, it was like, wow, this is so hard. And I need him more than I ever knew that I needed him. So in that way, I also realized, having kids, about myself, that I have a lot more sin laying in my heart than I knew was there. And so just like how we talked about asceticism, like, for example, fasting, like, you think that things are going well, and then you start fasting, and then just within the first week, you find that wow, I have a lot of anger or rage or judgment and things like just deep and within us that are just rising to the surface. That's what the passion, or that's what fasting will, and asceticism will do. It'll shine a light on those weaknesses that we have, those tendencies to sin. And so certainly that has happened to me, being a mother. I would say with each child, my repentance has deepened because I realize how much I need the Lord, how much I don't rely on him. And I'm scared because I don't want to have my sins affect my children. And they do. That's the reality. They really do affect my children because I'm around them, and it just feels like I'm constantly having to ask for forgiveness for my children. And maybe even more so with more kids because, it can be a lot at times, but I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as a good thing. I see it as, again, becoming more in the image of God. I think before I had kids, I might have fooled myself into thinking I was good. And then I had children and I realized I have a lot of work to do. I have, it's, again, I talked about this image, but like it's the same with marriage. You get married and you realize I can't really hide. I have to face these things now. And more so, that other person is pointing them out to me. And that can be, our first step in ridding those things of ourselves that, are not of God. And then you have children and it's like a floodgate. It is like, wow, I thought I was doing okay. And now, Lord have mercy on me. So I think those are some of the biggest things in motherhood is showing those parts of me that needed to be rooted out. And I'm still working on them every single day. And while I do that, showing my children what it means to repent and to be repentant every day in my life. Like one of the habits we have when we're going to sleep is I'll hug my girls and I'll say, please forgive me, a sinner. And they'll repeat, God forgives and I forgive. Please forgive me, a sinner. And we hug each other. And it just feels like the best way to end the day with repentance and reconciliation. And children forgive so easily. It's like I'll just totally lose it and I'll come back and say, I'm so sorry. That was not okay. And they'll say, it's okay. I say, it's not okay. I'm so sorry. I should not have done that. I should have controlled myself. I should have handled that better. Please forgive me. But if anything, my spiritual father tells me, he says, it's not that we model that we don't mess up, because we will mess up. But we model what we do when we mess up. That's the most important thing that we teach our children, is what to do when we mess up, because they will mess up too. So we have to teach them that. So stay encouraged. We're going to mess up. Show them what to do when you mess up. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very beautiful. My experience is very similar. I found out that with the presence of kids in my life that I'm not as humble as I thought I am. There's a lot of pride there, and there's a lot of ego, and all of that was just so really, really tested through motherhood. And you find humility in that, and in the way your kids teach you sometimes lessons. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. What do you think in the modern world that is, all about distractions and the collapsing, shortening the attention spans? What do you think are the biggest dangers for modern childhood?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a good question. I think technology is something that we should be very leery of, especially with children. Now I say this, full disclosure, my children are watching a movie downstairs. Okay, so they are here and we are watching a movie.
It's my fault.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. We had somebody who watched them and their kids, all good. But I would say technology needs to be something that we are using as a tool and that it's not being used on us. I would say I'm pretty unconventional in that, or I guess countercultural in that way. We have made decisions, about technology and our kids. Our children don't have personal devices. They will not have social media until a later time. And, we're very careful and particular about the kinds of movies and music and shows and books and all the things that we read. I think of our children as they're so precious and good and innocent that we have to guard everything that's coming to them. It's just they're very sensitive as well. It all has a deep impact on them. And so we should be very careful about the media and what we expose our children to. I think has to be countered with, what are we showing them? So I mentioned all the things we're not showing them, but what are we showing them? We're reading the lives of the saints to them. We are, reading the scriptures to them. We are bringing them to church. We are, eating meals together as a family. This is another thing where I think is slowly killing our families is just a lack of communal eating.
That's a good point.
And sometimes that means, we don't do every sport, or we don't do sports or because we prioritize being home as a family together. We're not glorifying busyness. So that's one thing we try to do intentionally. And I'm navigating it in real time, and it's hard sometimes. We do something and we think, maybe I'm not going to do that again. We try something. So those are things. And I also think that the influences that our children have are so impactful. So that can mean, of course, social media, which parents should be very careful with. And I would not recommend people give children under the age of 16 social media. I don't think that, there's evidence to show that it's not good for them. In fact, it can be very damaging to them. So that's sort of my unpopular opinion on that, but social media and also the friends that they hang out with, people that they're spending their time with. When we send our children to school, we have less control over that, obviously. I acknowledge that, but in as much as you can, I guess, control or curate the kinds of people that your children spend their time with. If you imagine that we become the people that we spend the most time with. I think they say 5 people I forget the stat, but we become the people we spend our time with. So that's the same is true for children, So surround yourself with good families and good children. And as they get older, even having adults in their lives that are good, virtuous, loving adults that they can rely on and go to when they have hard troubles. Who are those people that are going to talk to you? Is it their godparents? Is it, other adults that are, family friends or aunts and uncles? We have to think about those things too, because the teen years, they're difficult, they're tough. And sometimes kids don't go to their parents about everything. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So who are those people that they're going to go to? I think these have such a huge impact on their lives. And in as much as we can encourage or discourage certain relationships, I think we should do that. I think that's very important. And so this is part of, even just protecting them in general, right? I think our generation, I'm a millennial, we're a bit more aware of the many ways that, our peers or maybe we ourselves were harmed as children. Without our parents' knowledge. And so I think we're just a bit more vigilant on those things, That's the same that's true for social media now. We don't really know until, now it's we're going to find out in 10 years what's what's been happening with these young kids that are online and what they're exposed to. But for now, protecting them as much as you can, and keeping them, innocent and pure and protected as they should be. Making that a priority, I think, is really important.
So, Khouria Destinie, Orthodox Christianity involves a lot of repetition in life. Cycles of laundry and serving your children, serving your husband, serving your community, your church. How do you make sure that your heart doesn't become numb? And what are the ascetical practices that you have to make sure that you do give God time and yourself time to be with God?
Well, I would say I'm still learning that. I don't have it down. I think there are seasons where I am much more attuned and disciplined, and there are seasons where I am a disaster and flailing and my life, going hayward. And I'm like, what's the matter? Oh, okay. Because I'm not attending to the most important thing. So certainly in the struggle currently, but I think that there is so much beauty in the repetition, because there are times where, we do something over and over and over again, and it starts to just become like a part of us that when it's not there, it feels like something is missing. And so I find that with actually, taking care of my house, it has been a long journey of, caring for my house and caring for children. And it's gotten to the point now, I would say, even recently, I was just sharing this with my husband. I feel like I'm entering into a new phase where I genuinely love taking care of my house. I love, doing these, what I would have called seemingly monotonous things of laundry and dishes and sweeping and vacuuming and all these things. But now I really love it. And it took this postpartum with my fifth baby to really miss those tasks. I missed washing dishes. I couldn't believe I was even saying that out loud right now. I missed doing the laundry. I missed all these things that I thought I hated doing those things. So I think I'm entering, like I said, into a new phase of, I desire to do these things. I love to do them. I see how if I don't do them, the downstream effects of that where, I feel frustrated or, I feel bothered by the fact that they're not done because they're my task to do and I get to do them. And when they're done well, there's so much satisfaction in that. Taking that to the liturgical calendar, there are times where we have to miss things because of sickness, or our children are sick, or we are sick, or we have a baby. And, we miss those things. I miss them. I wish that I was there, and I wish that I was doing that thing that we do every year. And so it starts to become, traditions. That's what they are. They're a part of us, and so that when they're missing, we miss them and we want to get back to those things. So I think there's beauty in repetition because it's, there's a sense of rhythm that is out of whack when we are not doing the things that we ought to be doing, and not to say that you have to bake that cake every year, but if that's, something that you've grown to love to do on that special feast day, then you do it out of joy. You don't do it out of obligation. That's not how it is. Now, there may be tasks that we have to do that are done out of obligation, because, we have to clean.
Bless you.
I scared my baby. We have to clean that dish because somebody's going to use it again, but I think just caring for our things. I also thought, sorry, I just left that thought, but I also find that when things aren't going well, I have too much to manage. I do need to reprioritize and refocus myself in something that I did intentionally before my baby was born as I went through my house and just decluttered everything, just really pared down our possessions. And I'm feeling already, it was only been a couple months, I'm feeling like I need to do it again, but it's just a matter of being good stewards of what we have. Sometimes we just have too much to manage, and we need to recognize that and do something about it, get some help, or, tear down what we have to manage so that it is a joy. Even in my kitchen, that was the first place I started the decluttering. Once I pared down, we only need this many cups and we only need this many utensils. And I pared it all down. Everything had a place. Nothing was stacked in front of something else. It was just like, it all fit. It was so great to do this. That's part of what happened was when things are orderly and organized and there's a system in place, it's so good. It's when there's too much, there's chaos, there's no process where, after we're done with this meal, we just leave it to the next one. If we do that, it does start to pile up and become burdensome. But I think that what I've found is just being, intentional about each of those rhythms. When we eat breakfast together at the table, we all clean up and we don't leave the table in the kitchen until everything is cleaned. And when it's done, then we go and do our business. And that to me has been a huge shift in me enjoying the work and not getting too overwhelmed with things. Is just kind of doing it on a rhythm and a system, I guess. So I'm learning all of this so far, but I've been finding, even with 5 kids, it's just like, it can be monotonous to say, like, don't forget, do your job, clean your station. We all pitch in, I have to say that every single meal and every single day. But my hope is that it will eventually be something that we're like, all right, let's clean up. And then we all just, in a perfect harmony, work together and get it clean. But right now we're still in the trenches of learning and discovering how to do it well and working together.
Of course. Do you think that with the modern rise of trad wife aesthetic, that women are really longing for these sacred rhythms of life that you were talking about just now? Do you think that's the main reason why this aesthetic is so popular, especially among women?
I wondered about it because I think that even with some of the young adults that I'm talking to right now at church, they're also desiring the same thing, which is really surprising to me, I will say. I've always imagined like young people don't necessarily value traditional life, traditional marriage or raising children, but there is a shift happening for sure. And you can see that reflected in social media and in these conversations. I had a conversation with a young woman who she was telling me that, she follows me on Instagram and she said, I actually want kids now. I want children and I want to raise my children and I want to homeschool them. And she said, you've inspired me so much because I never wanted to have kids. And I was completely blown away by that because I thought, wow, okay, I didn't imagine that would be the effect of what I was sharing. But I've heard that sentiment several times, which, glory to God, that's a beautiful calling and a beautiful thing to want. But I think that there is something natural in women to create and to bring beauty and to nurture and, caring for a home, although that's going to look different between women. It's not an aesthetic. It's actually just like who they are is going to be different, no matter, So it doesn't look all the same way, but I think that desire to, bring life to the world, whether that's in motherhood or, any other, nurturing feminine ways, that is a natural desire that women have. And I think that, at least for my generation, we were kind of told a lie that, the most fulfilling thing you could have is like a career and being successful, and successful meant making money.
Yeah.
And I think many of us were told that lie, that that's where fulfillment is. And then what happens is, at least in my experience, you have children and you realize that that is inverted. Not to say that a career can't be important and, your call, so to speak. I'm not saying that, but that your children are more important than any other thing that you're doing. They really are. And I think every mother knows that when she has children. It's like I'm different. My life has changed now because of this child. And so we're having to reconcile those things. And so I think that's part of it. There's an innate desire to create, a warm home, and then somebody's showing you that that's worth doing, and you think, yeah, I want to do that too. I am constantly inspired by women who pour their lives into their children, into their families, and make it beautiful. So much of my home that I create is not from my own childhood and experience. That wasn't my experience growing up. I didn't have, a warm, cozy home. I had a lot of difficulties in my childhood, and that's a whole nother story, but I'm trying to create something that I've never seen modeled before. And so it can be sometimes, you fumble along the way. It's difficult, but you find your way. But the most important thing to me about my home is I want it to be a safe haven for everybody here. My children, my husband, anybody that walks into my door. It is the best compliment when somebody says, "Oh, it's so cozy in here. It makes me want to cry." I'm like, thank you. That's what I want everybody to feel. And even my children, we went on vacation for a week recently, and they came home and they said, "I love home." This is their home and their childhood home, and so it's worthwhile to create that, because if I don't create that, then who will? It's going to be me. It has to be me. And so I think that just creating spaces that are beautiful and warm and inviting, that takes a lot of intention, a lot of work. And sometimes that means that they're messes, and sometimes that means you have to clean your messes. And, there's a lot to that, but it's about how we feel when we're here together. And I think part of it is a safeguarding against the world. This is where we are working out our salvation, trembling, what we're praying together every day, and we're asking for forgiveness every day. And, I heard recently, when you leave your home, you should make the sign of the cross over your children. Because outside of your home, when you leave the threshold of your home, you're entering into, the place where the demons, roam and rule. And so the home it's like this, it's the kingdom of heaven. It's the little church. Sorry, I was losing that one. It's the little church. And so when we leave that, make the sign of the cross, and we guard ourselves, because we're not guarded in the same way out there as we are in our homes. And I think if that's our perspective on our homes, then our homes will look different. Our homes will be different, because it should be a safe haven. So that can be a whole other topic. I have so many thoughts on that, because I tell my kids this a lot, because when my house is messy and things are disordered, I feel very stressed. I feel frustrated. I feel all kinds of, overstimulated, whatever. And I tell them, like, this is my home, but it's also my work. So I have to work in order to relax. If I enter a room that's a mess, I can't relax. I have to clean it, and then I can relax, And so we work hard to make our home a place of peace for all of us, myself included. So it takes a lot of work, and it's good work.
Yeah. And also hospitality that you mentioned, people coming and feeling the presence of God, like a little entering like into a little church. The hospitality is such a big part of Orthodox Christianity. How important it is in your life. And I know, people know that you have 5 kids. The expectations for the house of someone who has 1 kid versus 5 kids is very different. Despite of the fact that you might be a little self-conscious about the house, how do you still open the doors of your house to others?
Yeah. Well, I think for every person is going to be different. I myself am an extrovert. I love to be around people. I love to have people over. I love people around all the time. So that might be different for others. But, if we're going to get together, I always say, well, it's just something to help. So the way that my brain works through hosting is I try not to make anything perfect, because if I do, it would stop me from ever having somebody over, because I guarantee you never be clean at the same time. Never clean. And so it just, my rule is it doesn't need to be clean, but it needs to be tidy. So
that's a good rule.
My bathroom, I do a quick scan. Maybe we clean the toilet and, underwear that was left out after the shower or something like that. We just tuck that away, and then, okay, we can host. But I think that imperfect hosting is actually more welcoming. And at least for me, I feel more comfortable when somebody lets me into their space and that's just normal. There's toys on the floor, and, the pillows are on the floor, and, I feel more comfortable and more at ease. So that encourages me to say, I don't have to have, I'm not trying to create an image that is not realistic when you come into my house. I do try to pick up so you don't have to step on our things. Low expectations on cleanliness, and just making a priority to have your rooms that are hosting easy to pick up. So it is not uncommon for my husband to call me or text me and say, hey, I'm bringing so-and-so over in 10 minutes. Now, that we have the kind of marriage that is perfectly acceptable, and that does not frazzle me. So I'm not saying that should be you, but, that's just our marriage and our relationship. And I'm always like, absolutely. So I have my house set up in such a way that, tidying and habits and decluttering are necessary in this way. But I can clean my living room in less than 10 minutes. My living room, my downstairs, do it all within 10 minutes. And that's because we tidy it up every day, so we've created habits and rhythms to sustain that. So I always am willing to host, and I have things in my freezer so that I can pop in some cookies. I can pop in some appetizers. I have chips and salsa. I have things in my home that are always hosting ready. I learned this from my grandma. She always had food that can be made very quickly when someone comes over. Or I have like an espresso machine. We can always make coffee, and that's something simple as tea. So I think for me, hosting is having, it can be a burden when somebody comes to your house and you are fussing too much of like, oh, I'm so sorry, it's so messy. Oh, I don't have anything. It can feel like the person who's there is a burden that they're imposing. And so I think it's important to just have, a generous welcome and warmth for people that come into your home, that you make sure that they know that they're wanted, that they can come over, that they're welcome anytime, and that you're glad they're there. In fact, you're happier that they came. I think that we can change the world if we opened our homes to people and let people in. I think it would change the world. I really do. I think we are more lonely and isolated than ever before. And also because so many of our homes that we're coming from, or maybe we live in, are broken. They're broken homes. They don't have home. They have no center, that people want to belong. They want to be in your home and belong. And so I really think that this is an untapped market. We could change the world by opening up our homes, and just lowering our standards for hosting, and just embracing people. I have not been practicing what I'm preaching until recently. I took a long pause on hosting, being overdue and pregnant, and with a newborn. Now, I did have people living in my home, so that's why, there was my in-laws were here with us, and my mom came, and my good friend came. So we had people in the home, but I just recently started opening up my home again to hosting. So that looks different throughout the week, but essentially I have one day set aside each week that I try to invite somebody over, and have tea and just talk. And that usually means my kids will either be playing outside, or they'll have a play date, or they're watching a movie. It can be challenging to try to juggle 5 kids and sustain a conversation. So I have ways of doing that even with my kids home. But I've been doing that intentionally, just one per week. And again, that's what works for me. But there's so many people that I think like, oh, I'd love to get to know them more. We had a good conversation at coffee hour, but we really couldn't go any further because I'm running around chasing my kids. And so I want to get to know them more. And so I'll do that. Or maybe somebody's going through a hard time and they ask me if they can come over. And I love that. I love when somebody imposes themselves on me, because I want people to bother me in a way, yes, of course, come to my house, let's talk, and I'll try to find time. But I am very busy. And so in order to host and be available, I have to be very careful with my schedule, to make sure that I open up a place for that, or else it will never happen.
Of course.
And so my husband and I are of the same mind as well. He is a priest. But we have people at our house all the time. And in fact, we didn't do it this year because we have a newborn. But typically after Pascha, we will invite our entire parish over to our house, which is a very small house. But we invite the entire parish over, and say, hey, come over and let's celebrate, the resurrection, and bring a dish to potluck, So we do that for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and it gets very crowded and it's very hot, and we're standing outside, and it's just so joyful. So I think that opening up our homes is such a ministry that anybody could do. Anybody who has an apartment or a living room, you can host, or even just go to a coffee shop, and I'd love to grab coffee with you. I think there's this illusion that everybody else is living their best life and they're not. I think that's something that the internet creates. Yeah. And so it's not true. It's not. Majority of people that are sharing things online, they have to be, aware that this is not a perfect portrayal of their life. We don't know what's going on behind the surface, but more often than not, the way that we really connect with people is in person, face to face, over coffee, over tea, over a snack, even meeting up with another mom at the park. These are things that we do to connect. It's important that we make the time and priority to do that, to encourage others.
And it also helps with avoiding spiritual numbness, as we talked about it before. It helps, having people around and having religious and spiritual conversations with people, even just personal conversations. It still help you to keep yourself grounded and also not get caught up with, just chores and daily routines. My last question to you is about another thing that might save the world: beauty. In Orthodoxy, beauty is not vanity. It's supposed to point to heaven. How do you make sure that your vlogs and your messages through social media are pointing ultimately to God?
That's a good question. Well, I will say I try my best to do that, but I don't always get it right. I have made mistakes in the past where I've shared something and regretted it and had to take it down, or so just know that I make mistakes and don't always get it right. But my attempt, I think, we have to be prayerful. We have to examine ourselves, and going to frequent confession would be helpful for that examination, to check ourselves and make sure that what we're doing and what we're saying add up to our goals and what we're attempting to do. So how do we know? I mean, sometimes you can know based on the fruit that it bears. Like I said, if it's something that's causing, fighting in the comments, or people to, question you or message you to try to change your mind. It's like, is that your purpose? Is that what you're trying to do? Because that will happen to me too. I have dipped my toes into some controversies, and it ends up on the wrong side of the internet. I did one post on creating like icons, I think, just like about iconography, and that was a couple of days of just like hundreds and hundreds of comments on people messaging me trying to like convert me, and it was just like, wow, okay, I don't want to be spending my time doing this. And I don't think that that's bringing glory to God in those ways. And maybe somebody else can deal with those things better than me, but that was not for me. So I think that whenever we create something, it's always recognizing that everything we say, everything we do, we're going to have to give an account for that. That's the dreaded judgment seat. Is this something that you're comfortable with your bishop seeing? Is this comfortable with something that your priest would look at if you think that this is good? I think just kind of having that accountability and recognizing the fact that your words have and the things that you portray have should give us a little bit of a pause before we share things. And ultimately, we can be deceived. We can do things that we think are good that are not good. We can copy what other people are doing and realize, oh, maybe that wasn't good for my soul. So I think this careful examination is important. In fact, I just read a quote this week. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was about how, I can't remember. It was quoting Christ. He says, like, there's people that have eyes that don't have eyes to see or ears to hear. Anyway, it was referencing that, and how there's people that see things that they believe to be true that aren't true. And so it's about Christ is truth. So we need to know truth when we see it. And part of that is clinging to him, So reading the scriptures, immersing ourselves in the life of the church, reading the Holy Church Fathers, reading the Bible, reading, the scriptures and the Word of God. When we cling to the vine, so to speak, Christ is the vine, we are the branches, we cling to him, we will have an easier time recognizing what truth is, recognizing what goodness is, recognizing what's, beautiful in a true sense, God is beauty. And so I think, the closer we are to Christ, the easier it will be to see that. But we can also be deceived. We can't get it wrong. We can confuse vanity for beauty, and we have to be good stewards of everything we have. So although perhaps it sounds lovely to have, all of these beautiful things in your home, is that reasonable? Is that something you can afford? Is that being a good steward of your money? We can sometimes flip the order of these things. I think if you go to a monastic cell, for example, they have very little. They've forsaken the world. And yet, I have gone to monasteries, they'll serve me a tray of cookies and it's beautiful. It's like, and it's like a water pitcher and, like it's done intentionally because they only have so many things, So simplicity is also beautiful. It doesn't need to be fancy. I've learned this from my dear friend, Khouria Destinie. She's like one of the most gracious hosts that you'll find, and everything she does is just a work of art, just like it's just a way of life. And we always talk about this because I've learned so much from her about beauty and simplicity, and just the way that she lives her life and everything she owns, and it's all very intentional. And she doesn't like overbuy things. She just buys the one thing and she keeps it forever, and so I think there can be some lessons there too of just simplicity, is what's most beautiful. It's not having all the things, it's having a few good things and using those things well for the glory of God. So I think that can be taken with social media too, even in the small little pebbles, as I call them, that I'm able to offer online. I hope that it shows the best of something. If I, for example, yesterday I recorded a few videos in the middle of my busy day. We throw pebbles out there when we have capacity or abundance. Yesterday I tried to do it in the midst of my busy day. I was just trying to convey a thought I had been mulling over for several days and didn't ever get a chance to share it. And I wanted to share it. And I began and I stopped and I began and I stopped and I got interrupted and I stopped. And so it ended up being a story series that was extremely disconnected. I wasn't even sure if what I was saying was true. And I ended up pulling it all down and just deleting it, because I never want to put out something that is not that it has to be carefully thought out, but just that it's not well done or a complete thought, or it kind of leaves more confusion than help. So, there are things that I still am learning. Okay, now is not the time, and I may never get this thought out, and that's okay too. It's not that important. Whatever I'm thinking is not that important. If I don't have the time to do it because of the life that I have, then that's okay. You can set that aside. I think it has to be, what we do in order to if we're going to glorify God in everything we do and everything we say, then we should probably think about it a little bit, make sure that it's right.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Would you allow me to piggyback on something that you said earlier about icons? It made me wonder, was it a big shock for you coming from Protestant background to encounter icons? Or did it feel very natural after your conversion?
No. The short answer. No, icons were very foreign to me. And I was very skeptical of them. I would have put myself in the camp of they might be idols. I don't know, but they scare me. And so that was my first impression of icons. People are kissing them. It felt so foreign to me in my experience. When we were received, although I had in my mind sort of accepted that the church has, accepted these things, and that they are used as a tool and, windows into heaven. I could understand that up here, but I don't think in my heart I was fully converted to the use of icons and their place. I sort of did it blindly without full understanding. Meaning I had icons at home that we would say our prayers in our icon corner, but it felt very uncomfortable and awkward, and I was unsure of all of it for a time. Flash forward now, it's been 14 years. I don't feel that way at all. I feel completely devoted and thankful to this practice of having icons. I mean, I have like my son's icons is right next to my head right here. We have icons in every room of our house, and pretty much every wall of our house has an icon on it. And at least in my downstairs, I want everywhere I sit in my house or any person that comes into my house to have an icon to look at whenever they're sitting there. Now that's come from years of collecting and getting gifts of icons and things like that. That wasn't initially how it was, but now we have such an abundance of them that I want everywhere I'm sitting to just have an icon to just look at. Or, you know, when I do my prayers, I try to venerate all my icons in my living room if I'm doing my prayers there. If they're by my, bed, I have an icon nearby that I can grab. So it certainly has changed. And I see that difference in how my children also interact with the icons. It's so natural.
Before I let you go, Khouria, I just wanted to ask you about your favorite saint and your favorite gospel.
Oh my, that was a hard question. I don't know if I can say a favorite saint. I have too many favorites. And they're represented in my children. So all of my children's saints probably, but I have a few others too that I have a special connection with. I'll just say my two that I have gone to more recently, that I love and have a special connection with. So, and what's so incredibly special, and it could make me cry thinking about it, is we now have their relics at our parish, which just feels unbelievable. It just recently received them. But the two saints would be Saint Olga of Alaska, who's newly canonized. She's somebody who I have had a growing and deepening connection to. And Saint John Maximovich, or Saint John of San Francisco of Shanghai, also a speedy helper, and somebody that I pray to, especially in very difficult times and difficult circumstances, because I've seen prayers answered from him. So those are the two that I would say I have a very special connection to. And then, of course, my patron saint, Saint Helena of Belgium, is my patron saint. And so she's somebody that I feel in many ways like I've neglected her, and she's always been there in the background, interceding for me. And every now and then I'll get glimpses of like, wow, she has like done so much in my life, and I am so ungrateful, and don't even recognize it sometimes. So I have to mention her too, because she has always been there. She celebrated on my birthday. That's how I discovered her firstly. And I think to myself, she's probably been there all along, from the day I was born. So St. Helena as well. So that would be that. As far as the Gospels, oh my goodness, they're all different for different reasons. But I would probably say what my husband would say, because he has sort of influenced me in that way. But he loves the Gospel of John. Very poetic and symbolic. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's really beautiful to see that. And so, yeah, I would probably say John would be probably one of the ones I would read. But yeah, beyond that, I'm reading currently through the Old Testament with my kids. So we're going through the Old Testament, and it's so cool to see these stories that I know from growing up, but reading them in the context of an Orthodox Christian with my children, they have such incredible, profound connections they see in these stories, and it's amazing. It's really amazing. You're just reading the story of Joseph and his betrayal from his brothers. And wait, how many brothers does he have? There were 12. Okay. how many? And they were like, wait, Jesus had 12 disciples and one of them betrayed it. And it was just like, interesting connection. Or they were talking about the Tower of Babel and the language was confused. My daughter immediately thought of
Pentecost. Oh.
Yeah, and how the flames came down and their language was changed and they could understand each other. And so we talked about the inverting of those two. I mean, the kinds of connections that they can make just by being immersed in the life of the church. And, but it's incredible.
Yeah. So. My daughter is also, she loves so much her little Bible. It's like a mini tiny version of a Bible. She wants to read all the stories, and sometimes she wants to read the same story on repeat. Yeah. But it's just so beautiful to witness the birth of faith in them and their first relationship with Jesus and with saints. And it's a miracle to witness. Really.
Yeah, it's worthwhile and so good to do. And then they help us on our path as well. Thank God for them.
Absolutely. The days that I forget or don't have time to read my Bible, I tell myself, well, at least I'm going to read it with her for sure. Yes, so exactly. To remind myself of the stories.
That definitely counts. I feel the same way. I sometimes will read a paragraph or a page or something out of my book or, but at least I've gotten the Bible with me. So
yeah. That also keeps us grounded.
Yes, it does. It's humbling.
Very humbling. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you. And I'm glad three of us made it.
Yes. My sweet little one.
Yes. Well, it was a pleasure also to know her and Victoria, right? To get to know Victoria. And thank you so much for, connecting with me. And yes, I wish you all the best with your with your Instagram and with your YouTube. Please tell our audience where they can find you.
Oh, yeah. So I have a website. It's www.asceticlifeofmotherhood.com. And then I have an Instagram with the same name. And then I make videos on Patristic Nectar Family YouTube. So definitely check them out. Great.
And I'll link all those pages in the description down below. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Thank
you.
Friends, thank you for joining us for this meaningful conversation with Khouria Destinie. If this episode encouraged you to think more deeply about motherhood, family life, asceticism, and the hidden spiritual life of the home, I invite you to share it with someone who may be feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, or simply longing for more Christ-centered way of living. Please subscribe to Hola Sona, to the channel of the Western Diocese, and also support the ministry of Ascetic Life of Motherhood. You'll find all the links in the description down below. My hope is that these conversations remind us that perhaps some of the holiest work in the world is happening quietly inside homes where mothers are raising children with faith, tenderness, discipline, and prayer. Until next time, dear friends, God bless you, and I'll see you soon.